especially in this summer short series, how the Spirit leads to the music that is selected, to the teachings that are being performed, and oftentimes where there's been very little communication about that. What's awesome about that is that God knows what He's doing, the Spirit is acting, and when we see that come out, it's just phenomenal. So what you guys may see is you may see the topic that's talked about up here today, but the people who are picking the worship songs don't often know what that topic's going to be, and they pick a song, and it's just amazing how that connects. We just sung about the future, and that's what my topic is today. Okay? And when I came in this morning, I hear the worship song that we're going to end with today, and I said, that's perfect. That's what I want to end with. Because it connects so well, I think, with what the teaching is for the day. I don't know about you guys, but I've really enjoyed this summer short series because we get to hear from people who we don't often get to hear from, and we get to just get a little bit of a sense of what's on their heart. And the connection and the teachings, I think Scott and I didn't connect a whole lot about this week, about what he was talking about, what I'm talking about, but I think you'll see some common threads between the two. And so that's just really, really cool. Slides ready up there? Woo. Whoa, there we go. All right. Good. So there's our topic for the day. And I'm aware that when we put that up on the screen, this is going to mean something different to almost every single person in this room. Because when we think about the future, I think some of us are excited. Some of us go, man, I've got this opportunity that's coming up that's just going to be great for me. Maybe I'm going off to college and I'm starting fresh there. Maybe I'm stepping into another position or a different role at work, and that really excites me because there's growth opportunity there. There's stuff that just really gets me excited. Some of us in this room are going to have a baby soon, and that's exciting. You're looking forward to that with excitement and just kind of wondering what that's going to just all look like for you. And that's awesome. But on the flip side of that coin, there's some of us in this room where we look at that word and it creates fear. Because when we think about the future, we think about all of the things that we're unsure of and the things that we don't know how they're going to turn out. And when that happens and we start focusing on that, it creates fear in us. For other people in here, you look at that word and you go, do you even know what I have on my plate today? I can't even think about that because I have so much going on right now that I can't even begin to think what tomorrow, let alone a week from now, a year from now looks like. And then for others of you, and myself included, you have overly thought and planned for that. So for many of you, like me, that's maybe part of the reason that you struggle with some of that fear, because you've really thought about this too much. Things like, I'm going to graduate from high school and I'm going to go here to school and I'm going to pursue this field and I'm going to graduate and then I'm going to get married and then I'm going to have 3.2 kids and I'm going to retire at age 60 and I'm going to have 6.4 grandkids. Okay? Some of us really think about this to that extreme level. And so when we look at this word, I'm perfectly aware that we have different perspectives on what it means. But today what I want to do is I want to shed some light on a biblical perspective of this, and I want to spend some time in the book of Isaiah in order to do that. But before we get to the scripture, what I want to do is I want to talk about Isaiah, who was a prophet. And prophets weren't necessarily the most popular people, because prophets had the role of kind of filling a gap. Their gap was to call people back into a right relationship with God when they were not acting in such a way. And so there were some hard conversations that the prophets had to have in order to bring people and call them back to where they needed to be. One of the other things about prophets is they received visions from God, and they used these visions from God in order to let the people know of what the future held so that they could be called back to live appropriately where they were at currently. And one of these visions that Isaiah received is in Isaiah 2, verses 1 and 2. This is what Isaiah, son of Amos, saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. In the last days, the mountain of the Lord's temple will be established as chief among the mountains. It will be raised above the hills, and the nations will stream to it. And I'm not going to unpack all of this, but you can see that it's definitely referring to the future. What we're really going to focus on is that first part there, in the last days. Because what's really, really cool about that, when you look at that in the original language and with the understanding that the people of the time would have, that in the last days is actually translated to in the behind days. So when we're thinking about the future, we're thinking about everything that is in this direction. I see this is going to happen, and this is what I hope happens, and all of this. But when we look at the framework and how they would have understood this back when this was written, they understood that they were moving in this direction, but they needed to do this and turn around and have that be behind them so that they could look back at where they had been and then be able to move forward in that direction. You see, it's really hard for us to move forward into this direction until we can turn around and look back this way and see where God has shown up. So the prophets would oftentimes use this to where they would say, look back, look at what God has done for us. Moses is a great example. You look in Deuteronomy 29, and Moses continually calls them back to, this is what we're called to do. This is what God has promised us. But in order for that to happen, we have to look back and see where he showed up for us. You remember what happened in Egypt? Do you remember how the water was split and we walked through and then our enemy was crushed by the waves? Do you remember how where we had nothing, God showed up and fed us? And when we can take a perspective and look back at what has happened in the past, it helps us be able to navigate into the future with the posture of in the behind days. What I think is important to notice is that when we do this, it's not so that we can dwell on something back here and prevent us from moving this direction. Because we're called to move into the future and not stand here and look back at the past and get focused on the past. But we have to have the perspective that when we look back in this direction, we can see where God has shown up. And it can help frame how we're moving in this direction. Because if we don't do that, it becomes increasingly easy for us to focus this way and be overwhelmed and then become very inactive because we don't focus on what God has already done for us. So this is the theme for the day, back to the future. Okay? For probably about half of you in this room, you don't even know what this is, but if you were born about the time that I was or earlier, you've probably seen this movie. The crazy thing is that the movie in its entirety is now in the future, because in the movie, he traveled to 2014, and then he had to get back, I think, to a dance at his school or something like that. I don't remember. Back in the past. If you haven't seen it, rent it. If you still can, I don't know if it would be in the movie stores. Maybe it's on Netflix. I'm not sure. But this is the posture that I want to encourage us to have. I want us to encourage us to have our back to the future so that we can look in the past so that we can move forward in that direction. Ooh, we'll get there. So I was encouraged by this talk by Brad Gray at Hot Rock, a basketball camp that the Gray family does for the community, when he kind of laid out some of this stuff. And what it really did is it made me realize that I wanted to share this with you today. But it really just smacked me in the face, because when I thought about my story, our story, Angie and I's story, this is so, so true. I want to kind of go through our story a little bit just so you have an understanding of how I have applied this back to the future in my life. Angie and I grew up with what you would probably say some pretty charmed background. What I mean by that, life was good. We both grew up in loving homes, Christian homes, had great, great backgrounds. And for both of us, I think that continued until we graduated from college and we got married. And even for the first 2 to 3 years of our marriage, things were really, really good. Things were pretty easy. And then we decided that it was time for us to consider expanding our family, and it started to get hard because we walked the road of trying to have a family for about 3 years with no success, and we did everything in our power and control, from finances to our emotions to just time and effort and energy, to try to take control of that situation. And I will never forget when we were on our way home from some friends' houses. It was on a Sunday, which is crazy. I don't understand how this happens on a Sunday. But we get a call from our insurance company on our way home, and our insurance company says, hey, that medication that's a couple $1,000s a month that we've covered for you as part of this process to try to help you be able to have a family, yeah, we're no longer covering that. And by that time, we had invested thousands of dollars in this process, and we just reached our point where we said, we can't do this anymore. And I think it was at that point that the heart for us to consider adoption came into our life, because at that point in time, it was the reality that that might be the only way that we have a family. And so we fast forward and we look, and we continue to do things to try to have some ability to see where we needed to navigate. And Angie actually self-diagnoses herself with the condition that was going on. And she had a procedure done, and before you know it, Brielle's on the way. We have Brielle. 2 years later, we have Amelia. I think that heart that was originally there for adoption was kind of just suppressed a little bit, because we had what we had thought we had wanted. We had our family. Things were good. And then, as so many of you in this room have done, we went on a trip to Haiti. We felt called to go. We go. We get off the plane. We get to Mission of Hope. Where's the first place that we go? To the orphanage, right there. And we interact with the kids at the orphanage. And we looked at each other, and we just had that understanding where we just kind of knew that that whole thing that was sparked back in the past is re-sparked again, and I think we need to do something about it. So we start a 2-year-ish process to try to bring a little one home from Haiti, and we reached just a standstill with it. We're forced with this situation where we have to put another $5,000 or $6,000 on the table to continue to move in that direction, or we have to make a decision that we're going to have to do something different. And we walked that road with Dan and Kayla because they were in the same boat, and it was incredibly frustrating and incredibly challenging. But we decided that we were not going to pursue that international adoption anymore. So then, who did that? I didn't do that. Oh, got it. Never mind. All right. So we decide that we should dive in to the domestic adoption front. But because we'd invested so much time and resources in Haiti, we decided that, you know what, we don't want to go through an agency and spend $30,000 or $40,000 to make this happen. So we're going to get our home study done, and we're going to go through and we're going to submit our home study to the different kids that we see on the websites. And Angie did a phenomenal job of submitting our home study to probably hundreds, if not thousands, of kids. And the frustrating thing is we know there's such a need, but we would submit the home study, we would hear nothing back. Absolutely nothing. Sometimes we'd hear back from our social worker and she would say, you know what? That's not right for your family. It's not safe. Don't do that. And so literally, late last year, we have the conversation of our home study expires in June. And it doesn't look like this thing is going anywhere. So what is our role after June? Because I don't think we're going to renew that home study and continue this process. Because maybe God's just telling us this is not somewhere we should go. And so what do you do when you feel like God is leading in another direction? You go out and you buy a Jeep. Right? So you go out and buy a Jeep because you have a family of 4 and that's what it's going to be. And so you go out and you buy a Jeep. Well, about 2 weeks after we bought the Jeep, we get a phone call. We're gone. It was January 16th. We were gone. We were up in Ann Arbor as a family, little getaway, and get a call in the morning, and it's Amanda, who is our social worker, who we hadn't heard from in quite a while. She calls us and she says, yeah, there's a couple of boys that you submitted your home study for, and you were the first one submitted, but the social worker on the other side doesn't want to review any more home studies if you guys are interested. So this whole Back to the Future thing kind of played out really, really quick in my mind. And it did for Angie and I, because I think when we first got that phone call, we were looking straight this direction. And I can tell you, probably the first 10 minutes, I was like, okay, let me do the math here. This is going to be 6, 8, 9, and 10. So I'm going to have 3 kids in college for the better of 5 or 6 straight years. That thing about the Jeep, we can't really get 6 people in that Jeep, so what are we going to do about that? I'm the guy that wants to retire at 60, so what are we going to do about that? And all of those things really started to come out. But thankfully for both of us, by the time we left there and we drove home, and we told the girls to go do something, and we closed the door in our room, and we talked about it. We both started there, but very quickly, we were able to take this posture and go, God, you took us through that to start this heart for adoption when we couldn't have children. You were in control of that situation. We had our girls. We went to Haiti. It sparked that again. That's always still been there since then. You said no to that. We started this. It's been really hard over the last couple of years. You put this before us. It's way different than what we thought it was going to be. And honestly, if it wasn't way different than we thought it was going to be, we probably wouldn't say yes. If we had gotten the call about 2 kids a week after we decided we were going to do this, we might have said no. But because of all of this stuff, you have put us in the position that we're at now to make a decision that's going to move us into the future. But we can see that you've been in control here, so we know that you're going to be in control here. And so this whole thing, when I understand this concept of being able to look back and look back into the past, it's so powerful because I think it allows God to use us where he wants us to go in the future. One thing that I do want to say, though, is I think it's perfectly okay that when we feel those concerns, like, I got to get rid of this Jeep, I have got to figure out what we're doing moving in this direction, and those things concern me, I think it's okay for us to cry out and say, God, I don't know. I don't get this. I don't understand it. I need you to show up. I need you to show me what we need to do. I think that's perfectly okay. But what I think isn't okay is allowing my eyes to say this direction and be so focused on that even if I feel like I'm being called in that direction, if I'm being compelled to move in that direction, that I can't do it because I'm so focused and concerned about what's over there. So I think that's perfectly okay. And I know for a lot of you in this room, you've got stuff back here that's really hard to deal with. But when we went through some of those situations, it was really hard to deal with. As Scott laid out in his teaching earlier in this series, like some of those things felt bad. Like there was nothing good for that, to that back there. But when we move and we look back at that now, where we've been called to move in this direction, what's really cool is those things were bad, but good. The bad good. That's the apple cider vinegar back there that is not something that we want to take in, but it's really good for us, moving us in this direction. And so, as the band comes up, I just want to encourage you guys in a couple of different ways. This is the future for the Parker family, as of yesterday. So, and this has really been a huge story of God's hand back here, because it's not at all what we had originally thought it was going to be, and it's all by God's direction. But my encouragement for you guys is to have you ponder a couple of different things for me. What concerns do you need to express to God in regards to your future? Okay? It's okay. I've done this. I've said, I don't get it. I don't know how it's going to work. I don't get it. But express them and leave them there and let him act and work for you. Don't express them and then be inactive or not move. We're still moving into the future, even though we're looking back towards the past. And the second thing is, how can I take steps to move into the future with the right posture to not miss what God is calling me to do? See, I think this is so important. If we don't have that right posture as we're moving into the future and we're not looking back at where God has been, it's really hard for us to take those steps in this direction. When you feel compelled, it's a great word. It's this connection that I love between the teachings. When you feel compelled and you feel fearful because of that, look back and see where God has been. Because he's moved in such a way to put you where you're at. And that thing that's stirring inside of you, listen to it and move into the future. So I encourage you, when we sing this last song, to really think about those things. The really, really cool thing is, when I walked in this morning, the song that we're going to sing, they were singing as I walked through the front doors, and I said, that's what we need to close with. Because the words of the chorus say, you have called me higher, you have called me deeper, and I will go where you are leading, Lord. If we sing it, it's our future. I'm going to go where you want me to go. Okay? But if I'm going to go that way, I probably need to go that way with a perspective and a posture that looks back at where I've been. So I encourage you all, consider those things, because God is always moving and God is always acting, and he's going to be back here and he's going to be back there. And we need to go with confidence to know that if he's shown up back there, he's going to show up this way. Thank you.